us out with this one, Christa. You were former prosecutor and on the defense side as well. And this is a tough one for the judge because, again, I think this particular witness, Maurice Hall, can be very helpful to the defense. They plan to call him. He was actually on both witness lists, but I think he's particularly helpful to the defense to talk about the drugs that he may have given to Floyd that day. Of course, that helps them with their defense that it was drugs that killed Floyd. But yet again, he also has a right to claim the Fifth Amendment. So the judge has a real tough balancing act here.
I think that it would be better for Mr. Nelson and for the defense in this regard if the judge did not limit him in what he would have to say, and better to have the more dramatic moment of Mr. Floyd asserting his Fifth Amendment rights on the witness stand. It's a very interesting position to be placed in, and I've never seen this done before where but, if you hearken back to Mr. Nelson's opening statement, he talks about how that Mr. Hall was going to testify, and he was going to testify about the drugs ingested, the fentanyl ingested that day. The judge is not going to allow that. There's no way that the judge is going to allow that. Mr. Hall's attorney is correct in her reading of this Minnesota statute, which was really in response to, I believe, the opioid crisis, which is exactly what Mr. Floyd, was addicted to. And so it's really, it's a tricky situation. You've got the confrontation clause on one side, where Mr. Chauvin has the absolute right to, confront the witnesses, to, make his defense. This is his constitutional Sixth Amendment rights here at stake versus the Fifth Amendment rights, constitutional rights of Mr. Hall. And it's a careful balancing act that the judge has to put on. And I don't know that there is any right or clear answers that will be readily available to the judge in order to make this decision. It's going to be a tough one.
Yeah, because I believe allowing him to testify about the drugs certainly puts him in jeopardy. But the other question is, why hasn't the AG or why hasn't the prosecution allowed for some sort of immunity in this case? I mean, at the end of the day, again, hiding from this witness, and they also made the argument that they didn't want him on the stand taking the Fifth Amendment. I want to get your response to both of those arguments.
Well, yeah, and I get why the prosecution doesn't want Mr. Hall on the stand and then saying, I refuse to answer that question and in asserting my constitutional rights under the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution, because that's a very dramatic moment and it plays very well to what Mr. Nelson is trying to get across, that Mr. Hall was his dealer and they were ingesting drugs while, at that very moment, while they had that famous screenshot that Mr. Nelson keeps showing where you can see maybe a tablet in Mr. Floyd's mouth. He wants that drama. That drama plays really well to juries. It's like that Perry Mason moments that you look for as a trial attorney. On the flip side, the prosecution also doesn't want, I don't think that they want him to testify at all. And I think that that's why they're not giving him immunity, because if he has that full immunity, he will be a very beneficial witness to the defense. He'll be able to talk very freely then about what type of controlled substance Mr. Floyd took, how much he took, when he took it. And I think that is just devastating to the prosecution in this case, because as you know, and we've talked about this, that this case rises and falls on the cause and manner of death. And the defense's case is that this was not caused by positional asphyxiation, but rather a fatal drug overdose. And so this is why Mr. Hall's testimony is so important to Mr. Nelson and why the prosecution will not grant immunity, I believe, to Mr. Hall.
Now, they may get some of that information from Shawanda Hill. She's the woman you see in that picture. She's also on the witness list and will be called, has not yet asserted any right not to testify, so we'll have to see how that goes. But let's talk about what Maurice Hill will testify to, or at least what he's proposed, or the judge has proposed. He'll testify that Floyd was unable to stay awake. They had to keep waking him up, and sort of his demeanor that time, which again will be suggestive of drug use. use. I'm wondering if that is going to be extremely helpful to the defense.
Yeah, it will be. It will help lessen the blow of not being able to testify as completely as they want. Fentanyl is an opioid, and it causes drowsiness. So, there was earlier testimony, I believe, from the medical doctor that if someone was high on opioids, that you'd most likely see sleepiness rather than combativeness. This, I think, plays into Mr. Nelson's theory of the case, if you will. So I think it's not as good as he wants, but it's, a bird in the hand is better than two in the tree.
Yeah, you take what you can get, certainly, in this situation. Yeah.